Good afternoon and welcome to today's Citizens Chat Show here on Civic Space TV. I would like to welcome you so much and thank you for being here every week on Friday afternoon. My name is Monica Moding. I'm sitting in for Damian Masesa, who is unable to be here. He's engaged on some other things. I'd like to welcome you and to thank you for being here every time we're on this show and for listening in, watching us, and participating in the conversations and discussions that we have here. This space is for the citizens, the people of Uganda, civic space engagement. And we bring to you topical issues of the week. And this week, we are having the discussion that is going on, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience and speech. What does it mean to an ordinary Ugandan? I would like to invite you to that conversation and discussion. But with me here is a panel always available to give insight into various issues that we discuss. I would like to welcome them and thank you for being here. Follow us on this channel every other Friday that we come to you. I'd like to welcome Major Awich. Thank you so much for being here always. And I know that you are always there for us. We have a resident panel here, and you never miss being on this program. I'd like to thank you, sir.
Thank you, Monica.
Major Awich, yes, thank you, sir, is the Director of External Affairs of NRM in the party of NRM in Uganda here. And I'm delighted to have you, sir. Next to her and to him is Sarah Bireete. Sarah Bireete is the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance, an organization engaged in civic advocacy for civic rights and constitutional governance in Uganda. She's a combatant always, in the good way, not negatively. Yeah, you're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Monica. But also in self-defense, I hope it's allowed to be combatant in self-defense.
It is allowed. Okay, in self-defense. Well, because someone might misunderstand it and say you were combatant in a negative manner, but
aggressive.
Aggressive. Well,
she's not aggressive.
She's not. Okay. And I like that she's next to the UPC man. I'm sure he's smiling.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've blended those colors very well with him. Joe over there, Joseph Forteno, is a presidential candidate in the next coming elections of UPC. That's if they happen anytime soon. Because, yes, you are in court, apparently.
Yes, and the elections already took place, and it's a matter to be resolved internally, and we hope that is resolved within the next several weeks. But I'm very delighted to be next to Sarah because she's smart, she's perfect, and Berretta today is very, very far. Although next to me here too is my other beautiful.
I don't know if Jackie Batamuliza is a research fellow from Institute of Great Lakes
Institute for Strategic Studies.
Thank you for correcting me. It's a mouthful. I struggle with it a lot. Great Lakes Institute.
Just call it GLIS.
GLIS. GLIS is better, our viewer. Great Lakes Institute of Strategic Studies. That is GLIS. That is the research fellow. We are glad to have you, Jackie, today.
The honor is mine.
And it's always a pleasure to have a team from there coming to this discussion because they are doing a lot of research and to have them also pegging in this conversation is very, very important. So I'm very grateful to my panel here today. And I know we can have a good conversation and that will inform the conversation that our people will have here on Civic Space TV. I'd just like to go straight to asking this question because as an ordinary Ugandan, sometimes we talk about things and the challenge is putting it into context. In Uganda here, do we really have freedom of expression? Do we have it in Uganda? So the conversation is around what this whole concept is about. What is permissible, what is not permissible, what is freedom of expression? That's what I would like my panelists here to engage in. And I would like to perhaps start with the activist of good governance. Yes, so that it's easier for you, the government man, to come in shortly.
Thank you, Honorable Muding.
Yes.
It is true we have freedom of expression in Uganda, just to start with.
Okay, you'd like to take the first shot?
Yes.
Perfect.
It's true we have freedom of expression. And freedom of expression literally would be what you're free to say, what you're free to think. That's freedom of conscience. And it can be expressed in words of statements, can be expressed in songs, it can be expressed in plays or drama. That's freedom of expression. Now, this freedom of expression is well codified. Codified means it is written down. We pick the codification from international law that Uganda has ratified, starting from Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and many other rights there too, instruments there too. At the municipal, what we call municipal in law, is the national. We could prefer calling it national, but in law we call it municipal. At the, not the city or municipal, but at the municipal, meaning national, is that a lot of codification has also been done from the supreme law of the land, the constitution. It provides in the Bill of Rights, and other laws, legislations there too. But I like to say that it is an entrenched provision under human rights, but not a non-derogatable one.
Okay.
I like this to state this clearly, because it's not like Article 44. Article 44 states rights that nobody can tamper with. But entrenchment simply means procedure for amendment.
Is available.
Yes, but strict.
Okay.
The strict procedure of amendment. Meaning that it can be amended in whatever way. But it is not, unfortunately, it is not one of the non-derogatable. That is Article 44. Which includes freedom from torture, freedom from slavery, freedom from, right to habeas corpus, and what is the other one?
A fair hearing.
Fair hearing. So, but nevertheless, freedom of speech is a basic right, inherent, God-given, if you may like. It's there. Now, the practice is that Ugandans are free to write, they're free to sing, they're free to talk, they're free to debate, like we are doing now. So this right is good, and I hope our government keep on protecting it and promoting it. So the right is there.
Fair and squarely put, Sarah. You've heard from the government man. He says the right is there. You are free to dance. You are free to sing. You are free to express yourself in whichever way that you can. I saw people expressing themselves by undressing at some point as well. So, cartoons, whatever it is. So the freedom.
Is Barbara free to sing?
So I think he has put his point very, very well, and I tend to agree with him in some point. But I would like to hear your thoughts, ma'am. Yes, is this freedom there really, as an activist who has been working in this area?
In addition to the legal framework, I want to add in the continental and regional legal provisions of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, with a commission that hears or entertains complaints from member states at the African Union level. We have the ACDEG, the African Charter
on democracy,
elections and governance. It also has provisions of expression, because the right to participate in elections goes hand in hand with the right of expression on leaders of your choice, as well as the right to inform or be informed in the build-up to elections to make an informed decision. At the regional level, Great Lakes, we have the Protocol on Good Governance under the auspices of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region.
Okay.
East African Community, the Charter, the East African Treaty, East African Community Treaty recognizes these fundamental rights. And like Awich said, that the national level, then we have Article 29 on freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, association, and assembly, as well as freedom of worship. Scholars have concluded that the only right out of Article 29 that is freely enjoyed in Uganda is freedom of worship. And the other rights are problematic in a number of issues that I will briefly talk about. We have 16 acts of parliament that contradict the provisions of Article 29, 5 of which have constitutional petitions awaiting determination to the extent of their unconstitutionality. And these include, of course, the state appealed the decision in the Public Order Management Act, but also there are provisions in the Public Order Management Act that were not decided upon by the Constitutional Court that have warranted the emergence of a new petition. We have the Stage Plays and Public Entertainment Act that is draconian, enacted in 1935. And as my co-panelist was saying that everybody is free to sing. And then my mind was like, okay, so is Bobi Wine free to sing? Because now we have full opening of the economy. But if Bobi Wine called a concert, then the police, like previously said, they would demand that he gets sniffer dogs, including the security requirements. Like before, when they wrote to him that he should patrol ambulances, sniffer dogs, whatever, and then said his arrangements don't meet the security requirements.
Okay.
So we have these challenges. Other laws include the Computer Misuse Act. There are 2 petitions in the Constitutional Court awaiting determination on the unconstitutional provisions in that act. We have the Regulation of Interception of Communication Act. We have, yes, the NGO Act. There's a petition where submissions have been concluded, awaiting determination, among others.
Okay.
Yes. So when it comes to enjoyment of these rights, including the right, freedom of expression, speech and assembly, there are problems. We have the emerging debate on hacking, on stalking, on trailing. Yet the Computer Misuse Act takes care of these provisions. But when it comes to the common concept of offensive communication, where the Kapwenza case now falls, did he not offend? The Supreme Court decision in Andrew Mwenda and Onyangobo versus Attorney General, which was a constitutional appeal arising out of a constitutional petition on provisions of publication of false news, sedition, or offensive communication. The Supreme Court held that to say that something is offensive is subjective and should be interpreted by court. But also the limitations to enjoyment of freedoms such as the one we are debating today should be what is just, acceptable in a free and democratic society.
Well, that is very confusing actually, because then where do my rights end? And I think Joe could help us a little bit go further than that, because there is a thin line between the right to express yourself and the offense, the right, people are calling it the right to offend. Where do I stop with my expression? At what point does it become offensive somehow? And so that is what you're saying, it becomes subjective. Offensive to who? That conversation. Joe, you've heard what Sarah, she has given us a good perspective. What is your take on this matter?
Sarah has given us a very thorough perspective. The government spokesperson has given a very substantial...
We have appointed him on this show
indeed,
as
substantial foundation.
Is the government.
Is the government. And your very dear self, the three of you as fine lawyers. But I think you ask an important question. Where? I was actually thinking through, including when, and as Sarah was trying to enumerate the contradictory legislations, aspects of the legislation against Article 29. And I was actually remembering how in 1995, actually, Milton Obote, in releasing UPC members to participate in the 1996 NRA elections, when Article 269 of the time, we still barred political parties, existed. He called it we can't contradict ourselves when we are pushing for freedom of conscience for our members, as he said it. So he said that therefore UPC members, upon their conscience, individual conscience, if they chose, you know, they may do so, proceed to do so, although it's contradictory to the position which we have. I'm addressing myself to a leadership question and decision. I think, as Sarah says, that some of these things are subjective, including the question of the Onyango and Andrew Mende versus the others. You know, that clearly we draw ourselves to legislations, to law, and you notice that my good brother, which normally refers to the NRM manifesto, he likes it these days, when it's now the good line to argue a case.
It is the official
Really,
document upon which government derives its policy.
Yeah, so really, beyond, I think, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, possibly many of these other legislations and statutes across the continent, and indeed in our own countries, possibly are not necessary if only we had nations and governments that respected the general rule of law as drawn from the Global Universal Convention. So with Article 29, why would we necessarily be wanting to look for this interpretation when you know actually these things are, my point is, they are actually political. So on this occasion, the 1995 Constitution was itself political. You know very well that it was absolutely not necessary. You know that the 1962 Constitution could have been amended with all these provisions in. But you also know that since 1995, there have been amendments and series of amendments. People keep on asking, why was it? Why did we actually go through a process of consultation and making a new constitution? No. I think the situation in this country is such that the state is using and conveniently able to use the stick of the Constitution where convenient to apply whatever interests it is for them and to protect whatever interests their corners are. We would not be having this conversation had it not been for the question about our cancer. And indeed, as I said, I think you yourself, Madam Presenter, said, where does it end? If this thing is subjective, you know, was Mr. Museveni really offended? I think shortly before break, we were having a conversation about our fantastic PM, very busy, Miss Nabanja. And the question was whether or not deciding to take a particular line against a particular journalist was a political, constitutional, necessarily legal thing, a leadership position. I think Sarah was arguing.
And what was offensive in her?
What was it? Yeah, you could simply say that. Well, I'm quite annoyed, but at the end of the day,
Media Council
indeed,
said there was nothing offensive about that.
Indeed.
Releasing the video.
And even if it was, I'm Prime Minister. You know, what is
Which
going to
video?
affect
When
me?
she was
Is it
seated
going to
on
affect
the
my
chair?
job? You basically then.
When she ran out of words.
Okay.
You basically then just kind of decide in
want
the
the defense
national
of the
public
truth.
interest to continue.
There's a
I
defense
think
of
on
the
this
truth.
occasion we are
Yes.
sticking to it because the poor young man had to be checked. He had to be checked in order to caution, to warn, and to scare off the other citizens of this country that while I begin to think about how to act, which is itself a limitations to my freedom of conscience, you know, when I begin to say that actually I don't like it, the extent to which Sarah is going, but I can't say it because these are the implications. I'll either be tortured, I'll be arrested and detained, or I'm actually not quite sure whether it's offensive to the person of Comrade Kaguta or his family, or it's actually just safe for me to hold back. Everything we are talking about is absolutely contrary to the very basic and fundamental provisions under the Universal Human Rights Declaration that we're referring to, and in this case, Article 29 of our Constitution.
Okay. Joe is emphasizing the fact that we are contradicting Jackie. Whatever we set out to implement in our Constitution is now a contradiction of what we are seeing. But a question still runs in the minds of many people about this right, Article 29 that we have. Does it not have limitations, so to say? Because then, I don't know, Jackie, you are non-aligned. In my interactions with you, you are not in any political party.
Because
you are a researcher.
I work for a think tank.
Yes, I would like you to really be honest about this issue, because I know from reading from your mind, I know that all my panelists here are honest, but from a researcher's perspective, what are the limitations that are available? Is this right in Article 29 limitless? Or are there instances where we can actually truly say a citizen has gone overboard in this kind of...
Here is what I think.
Yes.
that there are voices that are considering some changes and amendments, that means that it has limits according to them, and we must hear them out. And that's what happens in a democracy. But what I hear us fundamentally trying to address are a couple of things that I hope I'm able to outline in the order that I wish to outline them. I think what you're questioning here is the spirit of the law. Are the available provisions enough? Is what we are proposing necessary? And that begs the question, what is the value of the law? And I want to answer this in the context of a democracy.
Okay.
A democracy is a set of elements that work as an ecosystem to enable positive progress. And that positivity doesn't necessarily always have to be good, smooth, or no.
It comes with some, you know.
Exactly, because it's a space for people to be. It's a democracy is a culture that lets a person be, because it rises and falls on the individuality of the people in a society. So for people to be asking that, don't I have a right to offend, or don't I deserve a right to offend? You have to ask yourself, what's the future of that? Is that what you want the democracy, the direction of the democracy to be? That's not for this panel to answer. I think that's for the public to answer. If you say, let's create provisions that allow people to offend, maybe because they feel offended. And you know, there's many explanations as to why people want to such rights as, I don't know, as probably as there are people in our country, I don't know.
With different interests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the question there is, if you think you deserve to offend because you think government has offended you in one or the other way, is that to mean that does government's fault justify us becoming faulty?
Okay.
And that now comes down to the power of the individuality in a democracy. You understand? So I think that we have to get back to the drawing board. What is it that we are building to?
What is the desirable?
Exactly. What is it that we're building? Because the law doesn't exist in a vacuum of purpose.
Okay.
You understand? So we have to be organized and deliberate. And something I don't want to miss mentioning, we are a country that has had a very rough history. From individual perspective, from dominion, culture, political parties, tribes, and all these things. Constitutionally, we've had a rough history. And we are coming from a place of aggression. I think what we ought to be, all of us, be deliberate about, from the people that implement the law, to the people that craft the law, to the people that
Enforce
Joseph said, use it as a stick. We all have to be deliberate in how we become more, we move to the direction of tranquility. Because it's, for us to be moving to the direction of aggression, which has been with the politics from the 1960s to 1980s, when we picked the guns. That was another form of aggression. We don't want to be moving into verbal aggression.
Okay.
You understand? So I think we need to awake, and I think science answers that. The aspect of Kakwenza and actually it didn't start with Kakwenza. In Uganda, when police commit an offense, social media and media erupt into another equal force of verbal violence. And maybe it's necessary. But the thing is, we have to be debating on how to make that less and coming to a place of tranquility, because that is when we can make all the aggression we've come through in the past valuable.
Yeah. I think Jackie makes a fundamental point. She is in agreement with the necessary amendments, I believe, in her submission, that yes, the law is there, but there are gaps in that law which need to be, I think, strengthened. I would like to come back to Awich Pollar here on that matter, that if we are talking about having another legislation, what was the weakness with the current laws? But as I come back to you, I would like the two of Sarah and Joe to consider the issue of the availability of the law, but with what we have right now, what is not working? Why does it seem like it is a counter force? On the other side, government does something and then the citizens also, you know, encounter in another level matched force. I don't know if you're picking
Can I just say something very slight? No, I think from Jackie's perspective, I think the issue is not whether or not it's about the right to offend. I think the context of the conversation is the right to express. You know, it is the question of freedom of expression, which is the context. And what is grey is to what extent can we say that we've crossed the line. I think really that is the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Number two. But then very quickly, I think one of the reasons why
what creates the line?
Indeed, and which basically makes my very important other point.
The law creates the line.
No.
Where is the boundary?
Where is the boundary? But then the risks the risk to that line is this: if we do not get the threshold quickly, clearly, Jackie, the risks are the aggression that we are talking about will not only be about expression. Bottle it, then you'll get dubious guys going to the bush, claiming they're fighting for the right to freedom. Some other guys get angry, they throw bombs. Some other, one of the reasons why democracies, and if there are people in this country who want democracy, and I'm an expert on this both politically and academically around the world, if there are people who want democracy, then very quickly politicians, people who make the laws, should very quickly rush to create spaces where somebody gets angry here, they go down the road and express themselves. And that means, therefore, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, including particularly, very urgently, freedom for people to mobilize and galvanize and go to Kolo airstrip, and including to shout loud and call leaders and politicians names. That is what actually happens in democracy. Until this is an Iraqi thing, I organized demonstrations upon demonstration. Just a phone call. And then people mobilized in front of British Prime Minister's home and offices. So what are we in Uganda? We are talking about freedom of expression.
What are
and
we talking
there is a
about?
slight question of something on Twitter. That is the issue.
I think the question still comes back. Yeah, and I think Sarah is having something to add on that. Without the ability for people to engage, as Joseph, you're saying, what then is left? And what options do they have? Where do they go? And I think you would like to perhaps add something on that.
Freedom of expression has greatly evolved. We even have what is known as queer studies and queer communication or queer language, where the actors use rude communication because they feel that they are not being listened to. And if they use rude communication, then everybody
will
reads and gets their point. So we have queer studies as a theory of part of what people study and even specialize in and are awarded education certificates, diplomas or degrees or even PhDs. So if you take all that into context with the evolving of technology, we are in a digital era, we have several platforms of communications, or what would ordinarily be known as citizens journalism. The social media, or what we call new media in our advocacy, and then the laws, very many.
Okay.
The principles of legal drafting are that you must establish the lacuna and how you propose to cure that lacuna in the existing laws. The arguments being advanced by the proponent of the new law, Honorable Nsereko, he talks about hacking, he talks about stalking, he talks about abusive communications on social media. And the trend is not just on what Honorable Nsereko is proposing, but we see the same trend in terms of judicial activism with the judges versus public interest lawyers. We see the same trend because before Nsereko came up, the deputy speaker said that maybe they need also to engage with what the judges are engaging in terms of the happenings in the arena of judicial activism. So when you combine all this, this is what is prompting the discussion, including a proposed law. Honorable Nsereko is on record to have said on NTV that whatever he is proposing already exists in the Computer Misuse Act. And then he was asked that he wants to strengthen, which is really laughable in terms of legal perspective. You can only strengthen a law by amending. If you think if a law exists and you think there is nothing to change, amend that very law. Parliament has just amended the Public Finance Management Act. The succession amendment between, numerous, several laws, including the taxation law. So why wouldn't Honorable Nsereko go and amend the Computer Misuse Act and strengthen whatever provision he thinks should be strengthened, instead of seeking a motion to create another idle law in our law books? If you go to the regulation of new media, the Uganda Communications Commission, a body charged with the regulation, and then the Ministry of ICT, they have released several regulations on usage of the media that the MPs are complaining about. So, largely, when you put all this debate in context, you just see legislators suffering from obesity of ignorance.
He could actually still argue and sustain it that I am bringing a new law which will render the other one obsolete. No,
you amend. What we need, if they think they have a point, first they must express their lacuna that they seek to cure. That's a principle in lawmaking. What is the gap? And how do you propose to cure it? Then go under the Computer Misuse Act and cause the amendments.
I would like to pick...
Or show evidence that is not enforceable.
I would like to pick
still amendment,
which is
not a new law.
Quickly, before we go for a break, you're hearing, Sarah, do we really need this law? Do we really need the amendment?
A new law.
A new law, and all these things that are being, floated by the people on the government side. What is the lacuna we are trying to cure?
Well, I haven't seen the proposal from Nsereko. In any case, maybe it is a private member's motion.
It is, yes.
So I would be more conversant if it was coming from government. But his view, maybe I would have to look at it, and that would be a matter of my personal opinion or academic outlook.
Yeah.
But I think I'll stay for it now. But I want to comment about Article 29, because my Congress brother seems to think that once there's a provision in the Constitution, then you don't need any other law. No. All constitutional provisions need to be operationalized.
Indeed.
You need to operationalize it. Otherwise, if it stands as it is, it cannot be effected either in civil aspect or criminal. And therefore, this takes me to the bounds that we have been having. Where does it stop? Freedom of expression, where does it stop? You see, even if you look at it from a criminal aspect, it will still be governed under the principle that a guilty mind. You see, even if you're free to talk, it can only be judged that by the time you make such utterances, if the prohibition is on a criminal provision, by the time you make that utterance that you call freedom, you must have a guilty mind. And that's why the law says ignorance of law is no defense. Because by the time you pick a mango, you don't need to be told that Section 5 says don't steal.
Don't steal.
That's why somebody who is stealing a mango will look left, will look right to see if they are seeing him. He doesn't need to know a section prohibiting stealing mango. So in the same way, if this prohibition to protect this freedom of right is in the criminal aspect, it will still hinge on the provision of the principle of the law which says, did you have a guilty mind at that time? By the time you said, I had freedom to talk this about Sarah, somehow the court will establish that by the time you said that about Sarah, you had a guilty mind. So if it is a prohibition is from a civil aspect, then the complainant will establish that really you violated my rights. And this now brings the provision that I am only free to do this as long as my freedom doesn't interfere with yours. So if I say so, then you will be the complainant in my alleged freedom. You will have to demonstrate that indeed my right in exercising it goes to you. So therefore, there's no unlimited freedom in the so-called freedom of right or in the called freedom of right. In any case, you have defenses. The natural defenses, I will rely on one. One of the natural defenses, if you think somebody contravened your freedom, is the defense of the truth. If, for example, in the case that the journalist was arrested for releasing a video, he had the defense of the truth. In the case of Monitor versus Fono, when they alleged the case of the supermarket, Monitor relied on only one defense, the defense of the truth. They said, otherwise you'd have the defense of apology, that I said it in my freedom of saying, but I apologize.
But
okay? But now, if not, you will still have your defense of the truth. Yes. And therefore state it there. If you think you are being unnecessarily limited in your freedom, state it that why I said this in my freedom of expression, because I was saying the truth. And that's what the Monitor said, told Fondo that our defense is you stole a pan. We have a recording. So no apology. Yes. So why are we fearing the element that freedom of expression has limits? If it doesn't, I mean, if you think it does, there are possible defenses there too. But check from the criminal aspect, you are judged by yourself by the criminal intent.
And it is left to court to interpret,
to decide.
To interpret
what
would be the truth and who
of course, all laws are not interpreted outside court. Otherwise, if we are interpreting it outside court, it becomes our opinion.
Let me just
any attempt to interpret a court outside, I mean a law outside court, is a mere opinion.
Why was Kakwenza punished?
I just want to ask you,
he was taken to court.
Before court.
Before court. A foolish question. So if I called you foolish as a moding,
and you got caught and proved that I'm foolish.
So I mean, would that become an offensive statement in a way, rendering court processes to interpret that? Because you remember what court was saying, it is subjective. So if I called you foolish in a way, would that become an offensive?
I said the freedom and the offensiveness. I said the freedom, I mean the offensiveness is determined if the complainant chooses to go either civil or chooses to go criminal. Okay? So in this case, if I chose to go under civil, then I will have to prove that your utterance to me was a violation. But if it is criminal, then the court will have to prove that you did it with a guilty mind. And there are procedures there too to prove.
Okay, so I think that we could go for a short break right now. But when we return, we continue with this conversation. There are quite a number of things which are still not very clear, I believe. And my panel here is very able to dissect these issues when we return.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back, our viewer. We are here on Citizen Chat Show, and we are having an interesting conversation on freedom of expression. What do you think about this? And does this exist in our country, Uganda, today? And of course, I've been joined by the usual, panelists here, dissecting very difficult matters. And when we broke off, we're having this discussion whether the law that is available is sufficient or not. Do we really need another law? And I just want to get from Afande Awich whether we don't have sufficient infrastructure already in Uganda, and also whether we need another law in that direction. I think that a couple of your friends in government have spoken out in support of Honorable Nsereko's bill. Do we really need Nsereko's bill in this instance?
I have not had a look at Nsereko's bill, but talking about infrastructure to enable,
To implement.
to facilitate freedom of speech. You can have infrastructure in two ways. You have the soft infrastructure and the practical, the hard one. Now, the software one I mean here is the legislations.
Okay.
The constitution is there in place. Other relevant laws are there in place, both to promote and to check that it is not abused. So to me, the laws are in place. Now, of course, we live in a dynamic world. Laws are not cast in stones. Sarah Ebley brought out that there are principles that govern amendment of laws, in that you first check the lacuna, or you preferably you could say the mischief that you intend
trying to cure. Okay.
So time and again, with sophistication of society, many challenges come up. So I wouldn't rule that at this time, maybe in future, there wouldn't be need for a law. But if there would be a need for a law for the software that I talked about, then we still need to go to the drawing board and say, what mischief are we curing at this material time in our society? Or what is the gaps that we did not see when we are passing the other law? So therefore, whoever wants to propose a new one should check against that. But I also like to say that in practical terms, the hardware infrastructure is very available. Many Ugandans will know that at one time, there was one Radio Uganda. To the extent that any soldier who would reach that radio station would declare himself a president. Now, I don't even know the number of radio stations we have now.
Yeah, more than 100.
More than 100.
Now.
And all this is meant to facilitate freedom of expression. We have numberless televisions. All this is meant to facilitate expressions. We have many newspapers, and all this is meant to facilitate. We have also actors. We have dramatists. I think President Museveni is the only president who is cartoon. I repeat, President Museveni is the only president who is cartoon
so many times,
and nobody is convicted of it. I don't think it happens in many jurisdictions. Yeah. So, so what I'm saying here is that we have the software infrastructure in terms of legislations. We have the hardware infrastructure in terms of facilities that facilitate the expression of freedom of expression, including computers and technologies. So I like to submit that the infrastructure at the moment is available, and the people are enjoying freedom of expression. Even in this forum, Sarah is enjoying freedom of expression.
How about you?
Of course, for me, you don't need to say it. But even you are expressing freedom of expression here in civic.
But why do I say why do I get the feeling that the issue of Kakwenza was taken as if, you know, why does that particular case becomes a problem in Uganda's society right now? Because then it appears that they are prohibiting him from his personal expression. And I think that the conversation was built around that, that when there are people who hit hard, then they become a problem. What was the Kakwenza issue even an issue in terms of freedom of expression?
True, eating hard goes beyond.
No, Kakwenza, I think, sent out some tweets over Christmas, 28th, 29th. And it was alleged that some people felt offended. We have the laws. In case any Ugandan feels they've been offended or they have been defamed, we have civil and criminal defamation. We have a range of provisions to protect people's liberty, including those on the sending and receiving end of various communications. The issue of Kakwenza, some people have misinterpreted it to mean that the activism around Kakwenza means people never wanted him to
express himself.
To be presented in courts of law.
Okay.
So the question is not whether Kakwenza should have been arrested or charged or not. The question is the manner of arrest, where he was kidnapped, the period of arrest, the place where he was detained from, unknown, illegal, ungazetted, and the manner in which he was treated, where he appeared with all marks and crossings on his body after gruesome torture by the people that kidnapped him. So the debate around Kakwenza is a violation of Articles 23 and 28 of the
Not
Constitution.
29.
Yes. 23 and 28 of the Constitution on manner of arrest and the personal liberties, but also a right to a fair hearing, a manner in which citizens should be arrested.
Okay.
Officers identifying themselves, telling you what crime they have committed,
Yes.
telling your next of kin where they are going to detain you, allowing access of family, lawyers and doctors, and producing in court within 48 hours. That's the debate. But also freedom from torture in Article 21, I think. Yes, because he was tortured. So that's the debate around Kakwenza. It is not whether he should not have been presented in court for courts to pronounce themselves on the nature of his communication and whether it was offensive or not.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not the debate. But on the question of whether we have infrastructure to implement the enjoyment of freedoms, especially in light with Article 20 of the Constitution, first of all, fundamental rights and freedoms are not granted by the state. The state can only regulate and should not prohibit. And that is normally the confusion, because even we faced it in Parliament during the electoral reforms, where Article 72 says Parliament shall regulate the participation of independents and the multi-party system. And some MPs thought that then they had the power to stop or outlaw independence. So there is normally that confusion, and I thought these were simple English words, regulate, prohibit, but they are normally the most misunderstood.
Yeah.
So when it comes to enjoyment of rights and freedoms, I will use the example of assembly and petition, right to assemble and petition. In Uganda, these are the most difficult rights. If you inform any police officer, including IGP, that you intend to petition, I think the recent people were the medical workers. When they were moving to take their petition to Parliament, the way they were mishandled, a young female doctor was almost thrown on the road and bumped off by police. So a simple right to petition is not enjoyable in this country. A simple right to demonstrate is unheard of. The last time it was enjoyed, and the late Kawes, may he rest in peace, the NRM brigade was demonstrating against the pronouncement of Amama Mbabazi's candidature. And then the AIGP Kawes got them on Kampala Road and they properly put them in a pickup and said he's giving them a lift back to Chadon. When the others are manhandled, tear gassed, pepper sprayed, and brutalized for attempting to enjoy their constitutional and natural given rights
Of association.
Okay. So we have challenge of that brutality around assembly and the right to demonstrate, brutality and selective application of the laws that even extended to the COVID regulations, as if NRM are treated like, proper children in a home and arrest street children. So we have these challenges in the country, and I think the infrastructure has problems.
The infrastructure has problems.
It's unfair for Sarah.
I want
Sarah
to-
has
yes.
gone to other rights.
To other rights in
So, which we are not prepared to
Rights of
debate on.
association.
We should restrict.
Assembly petition is
No, we
not
should-
about content
we
rights.
should-
We are
We
dealing
should
with
restrict
no
ourselves
freedom
to
of
freedom of
expression.
expression.
Yes.
Because if you bring in debates that we are not prepared for, then that is
You are
unfair.
restricting my
Okay.
rights to demonstrate
What a
my
manifest-
point.
Well,
What a
I
manifestation.
want to manage the situation by allowing Sarah to confine herself to freedom of expression, as Awich has talked about. And I want to move to Honorable Mr. Yeah, of course, Honorable in waiting in a way, because you're a politically active animal.
Oh, His
by all of-
Excellency. His
His Excellency.
He's aspiring for His
Yes,
Excellency.
I meant to say
Way
that.
above honorable.
So the issue that Sarah talks about, Article 29. Article 29 has been misused in this country. So now, if we do not have ability to express ourselves as Ugandans, what next? Where do you think we are going to go? And or rather, what more can be done in terms of, you know, this particular right? Because it's fundamental, I believe. And I think Mr. Awich alluded to that. Because we see a lot of anger on social media. And when I think when people exchange, as Jackie had alluded, the citizens also counter the government's workings, because we no longer can associate. That's why Sarah's argument is relevant. We can no longer go and associate.
Thank you for protecting my
a
right
petition.
to
We are now left with the
express
media
myself.
here and there. So I just want to pick your thoughts, my panelists, again on that matter. Yeah, yes.
No, it's extremely worrying when our land friend from the NRM very freely seeks to boast on this very serious issue that from one radio Uganda television, actually built by UPC, if I may say so,
to 300 plus.
to 300
Wasn't it built
to
by
to 300
colonialists?
plus. No. The main establishment was built by us immediately after independence. Oh, we went on fantastic infrastructure, including a proposal for the colored television. There was this conversation taking place the other day. You know, this country is possible. We just need proper leadership. But it doesn't matter who, but so long as it's in the interest of all the people we can. But the point is this, that now there are so many, thanks to Mr. Museveni, actually...
Is that questionable? It is a fact, I think, in terms of the numbers.
It's a very sad fact.
You need to compare with other countries.
it's-
Some as if it's an NRM move.
You know,
it's a
Can you
miracle.
imagine? Mr. Museveni has been in power since the emergence of mobile phones.
Yes.
You know, so it's only him, yeah, because it's the only person who's.
So is that their achievement?
Well,
It is one of it, yeah.
Which one?
Maybe
Mobile phones?
No, the first
no,
wave
the
of
fact that they've been around for so long
Yeah,
that
maybe,
nobody else has had a
the
chance.
space. In
Yes,
other words, they have argued that the space is available for
It-
engagement.
No, they've argued that, you know, they've been here around so long that nobody else has been. Of course, nobody else has been since the creation of mobile phones. That's how long Mr. Museveni has been around. And, you know, 36 years is not anything to clap about. In fact, one of the reasons why we're having this debate is because, and I'll take us back to Kankwenza, since that is where my good friend is most comfortable. You're asking me about the implications. I go around the country and I talk to people. You'll be amazed, Monica, how many Ugandans actually fear saying what I've just said, that Mr. Museveni has been around since mobile phones. Now, those are the implications of things that squeeze, that if it's not Kankwenza, for those who don't have access to social media, what else? What would they be? You know, there is a huge economic implications, because if you have a population where people can't think, in fact, I was having a conversation the other day, actually, it was a debate, an economics debate.
Freedom of thought.
Yeah, you know, it means that you have no basic competition of ideas. You know, that trouser could be designed in such a manner that is ABCD, and then if you know it might offend the guy who was putting on bell bottoms, and if the guy putting on bell bottoms has got association with the NRM because they've been around for such a long time, then you hold back this person, you kill innovation. You know, I'm making it in a very simplistic way, but basically that's the thing. No, the implication is that.
But the opposite could be true. You see, China is a country where almost there is no freedom of expression in any way. But look at their development.
But I think that's actually very interesting to bring in China. And that's the NRA contradiction.
But is it
in
true
China,
that there is no freedom of expression?
in China,
Well,
no. there is freedom of expression in China, but within a very designed and very deliberate communist party structure. Number one. Huge amount of research and competition. 3, huge investment in education. Do you know in Western Europe and North America, amongst the most excellent performers in education, competitive education, are Chinese, you know, and they're state pushed. When here, if you see what's happening, it's a huge contradiction. So China is actually a bad example that exposes these guys in NRM. But it's also a good example where if there is a deliberate and purposeful one-party state that is designed for the people, in the interest of the people, it would be a contradiction for me in the UPC, but it would work. But you know, these guys just simply need to
a contradiction in democracy, right?
Yeah. It just goes to that aspect of everything is an ecosystem. Yeah, where you have what you're calling deliberate structure. Why? It is deliberate because everything applies to another. It's a structure of things. So you can't pay attention to one detail and neglect the other.
When in this case, actually, the interest is focused to an individual, very confined, an individual, sustainable individual. And that's actually the unfortunate reality in this country. And that is a bold, frank thing, to the extent that coming back to the law, coming back to the constitution, coming back to the Kankweza case, it is very, very, very much about simply using Kankweza as a test thing. This is what we do to those people who dare play around with us. I know Mr. Museveni, there's an official staff, which I don't want to go on civil television, where before he came to power, he actually showed a certain opponent, this is what we do to people who don't agree with us, but I don't want to go into it today.
Well, I think in the communication that Kakwenza had, there were issues to deal with corruption. You are a corrupt person and all that. Has corruption, saying someone is corrupt, become an offense?
Yes.
I think those are things we need to reflect further.
Yeah.
But this conversation, Jack, is really about what are
Is
the
that what
limitations.
Kakwenza is saying?
Yes, he did.
I thought Kakwenza's thing had to do with the body size and...
Yes,
No, but also-
so if you tell me that my hips are big, which is a fact, is it an offense?
But it's different from saying you are corrupt.
He did have something on corruption as well.
He did?
Yes.
And she's from
On
Bushenyi.
it.
And then we share what...
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, of course, the discussion of corruption
Yes.
is so subjective, really,
Indeed.
and it is a political conversation. So then, in this discussion now, where can somebody, end? Personally, I'm having a problem to understand what the limitations would be in this instance. Jack, do you really have anything else to comment on that before we move to our final engagement? Feel free to just make a submission.
I would like you to make a clarification.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the limitations?
Limitations to enjoyment.
To enjoyment of
freedom
this
of
right.
expression.
Because, yes.
I am very allergic as an individual, and I wish it for everyone, that to the thought of enjoyment without responsibility.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So whatever the limits we have to create, we have to be taking into and whatever even the responses we get from government or even the public or the civic space people like
us
my
here
friend
now.
Sarah.
Myself.
I think Sarah is at another level. So, whatever we try to address, it's very dangerous for now and for the future to design benefiting mechanisms and then do not take into consideration the possibilities of irresponsibility.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe the definitions of those terms cannot be set in this meeting.
Yes, that's true.
But we have to be careful as to not want to pull to our side and forget that we are actually operating in on a mat of other human beings, and that doesn't justify things like torture. No, it doesn't. But even the person, if we had a sober discussion about torture, it should cause the person who was considering to torture not to torture,
not to do that,
whether the law is written or not. And in my view, I believe in the power of persuasion as one of the indefinite,
the mode of communication.
Indefinite tools that
Okay.
democracy presents us with.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, or humanly speaking, if we had informed debates and discussions, you probably don't even need a law against torture.
Yeah, fair enough.
Someone could just be convinced that, you know what, if I torture someone, I'm interfering with their future selves.
Just create a culture. Just
Yeah.
create a culture.
Yeah. I'm interfering with their future selves, which is a burden to me. Who is causing it? You understand? So some of these things don't even need laws. Yeah, they need people to understand why should you not? And people, I believe, people have the capacity to come to that place where they acknowledge by themselves that this is offensive, whether it benefits me or not.
Okay, what then do you have to say in line with the fact that the other rights, freedom of assembly, freedom of, petitioning,
Yeah.
are a little bit affected? And I think that is why our
So not
angry
a little
youth
bit,
and
it's like they are outlawed.
outlawed, as Sarah is arguing. And that's why you're seeing these, exchanges on social media here and there. I am now trying to drive you
Here's
to
the
making
thing.
some of your recommendations. How could we improve the
Yes,
situation?
Madam Monica.
Because there are really issues at play and at hand that the public is, speaking to.
There is one thing I am 100% certain, in my view, this is a Jackie Batamuliza view, it's not everyone's view, that the aspect of knowledge is still very minimal in our society.
Okay.
And knowledge could qualify as a tool in itself in the dispensation of democracy. That is why democratic nations do immense research. Because we don't do things on assumptions, on allegations, on self-pronouncement and things like that. There has to be informing, like knowledge, like raw knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah. And why do I say that? Much of the friction that we see in the media, in the political space and whatever, it's all coming from that place of aggression. But aggression is something that comes from a place of like no option.
Yeah.
But
denial.
So when you find a country like Western countries at peace as they are, it's not by accident. They've been all over the world. Every mistake that they could find themselves at the verge of making, they have information where it has ever happened before, whether it's in history, whether it's in some geographical space elsewhere that's not in their space, and that's the value of knowledge in a democracy.
Okay.
So if you would like me to recommend what can be done about
yes, please.
This friction that we see, we need to strengthen our value and appreciation of the instrument of knowledge. And there is a media tool to execute that. But media is so much left to entertaining and news, which is an accident for a democratic country. And we shouldn't be attending to the present matters, present issues. Whatever it is that we are handling, it should have a future face. And a future face that doesn't only appeal to the person demanding, but also the
consumer.
Exactly. Because in this arrangement, you have the public, you have government, and you have
the public.
No.
Okay.
Let me say the people who demand on behalf of the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Civil society.
Maybe we can generalize it as civil society. In our country, when you say civil society, people run to NGOs. They don't know that even church, even is civil society.
Correct.
Yeah. So all these things are not defined.
Yeah.
You get it?
Okay.
So if civil society came up with something that's of value to the country, and it has something appealing about it to the government, I don't see why government is going to have friction about it.
Okay.
But what happens is there is always a gap in there is always a gap of the capacity to convince the public, the government, and like all the entities Yeah.
Okay. Conversation.
And that's really just my analysis.
Okay.
It's not that. And had there been a research, I would very much appreciate to take a correction.
We are actually coming to the end, and I would like to hear your recommendations. Feel free to make any comment, but also draw towards the end. Jackie has made recommendations of building knowledge before, engagement, research as being a foundation to any, legislative work here, which we are talking about. But also she engages on the issue of, a cross conversation, deepening the conversation and understanding why, for example, the proposals are even important. I think that's what I read from her recommendations, which I think are fair and, good. And I would like to come like that in terms of your quick thoughts on any other issue, but also recommendations. What do you feel at this point in time should be done going forward to take the country forward?
I think this country needs purely political and well-deliberate leadership. At this material time, that leadership can only be provided by Mr. Museveni. Mr. Museveni is an old man. He's been around. He claims he has been so much intrigued, so much annoyed that he goes so angry. He went from Berretta to the bushes to fight to come to State Power House. So Mr. Museveni has got sufficient reasons with experience to be able to become the mild elder with humility. I know Comrade Awich during the early break was trying to talk about how this guy is going old places. Actually, that is sufficient reason for him to thank God for all his life that he's had, and then make sure that he plays it a bit safe. It needs political leadership. In that space is where we create a national culture of tolerance, a natural culture
value
of
system. Jackie talks about
parish system. I was going to say parish system. Those experimental things, but I'm not going to it. Yes, it's a space in which civil society is not seen as opposition, and where opposition is not seen as anti the other. Civil society in established democracies, Jackie, the Oxfam of this world, Oxfams are actually national think tanks, particularly when it comes to development issues, developing countries, and sometimes they even use them, to serve their, if they like, their foreign policy thing elsewhere, including here in Uganda. That is what they do elsewhere. Here, who should lead on that? Museveni and his NRA. So really, the whole thing goes back to them. The other element of civil society is that when religious leaders create, the path for, again, this tolerance and forgiveness, things like that, maybe we would have had the archbishops, make phone calls to Mr. President and say, Mr. Museveni, please don't embarrass our state. I was very privileged that at the early stages of my exile, which was basically an attempt by NRA to completely resist opposition, when I became a young exile. One of the consolations for me was the then Archbishop of Westminster, the late Cardinal Basil Hume. He happened to be one of the most revered in recent times. He was the voice of reason, voice of reason to Downing Street. That is what we need: leadership, political leadership, to create this space.
But leadership, in this instance now,
leadership in a very quick way. That when legislation is set, when a tone is set, it comes from the government and the president. Simply, let citizens calm down very quickly. I was watching a video earlier, which has done the rounds many, many times. You talk about other countries. No, merely here in Kenya. Kenya, which was a dictatorship when we had our second administration in the early 80s. Uhuru Kenyatta sat in the national prayer breakfast with Ruto and Raila Odinga, and then apologized and they hugged. Now, of course, this election in time, but that, when it happened the other time, was a symbol that many of these other things that we talk about is possible. Going forward, it is leadership, and that leadership needs to come from Museveni. What we are discussing today is the result of a failure, direct political failure by Mr. Museveni to push for his self-interest rather than national interest. That is the only thing I can say.
It has been argued that we blame Museveni too much
because
everything.
He's boss. It's not a blame.
Yeah.
Leadership comes with the responsibility, as Jackie said. This one here going forward, because you asked which way forward, and Jackie suggested how we could do it from the... No, the leader that creates the family environment in which here we have dinner this time, not beyond 6 o'clock, and when children, we smack or don't smack.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Sarah, I would like to pick your thoughts on any other outstanding issue, but most importantly,
The
recommendations
conclusion.
going forward.
I thought
we want to inform the discussion.
Yes, I thought that in the debate on freedom of expression, we missed out the fact that the new media or the digital platforms are self-regulatory.
Mm.
If you go on Twitter and post offensive communication, you can even fail to post. If you have a picture that is considered too sensitive,
Inappropriate.
Twitter will automatically tell you
To
that
delete.
that picture
Mm-hmm.
is not allowed on their platform.
Okay.
If somebody complains about the message you've put on your timeline, Twitter will suspend or even delete that post. They have 3 options.
Okay.
Delete that post
Mm.
that has been reported, they investigate and act, suspend your account, or even delete your account. So, and it's not only Twitter, YouTube, all these new media platforms are self-regulatory. So when, and that goes also into the question of Kakwenza. Some of us who do digital advocacy, we are normally attacked, abused, false propaganda, cyber harassment. But you have a choice. So freedom of expression and association means that even when I don't want to associate with you,
Okay.
you don't associate with me by force. So I can block you, I can report your account. I mean, there are all these tools that we use on new media to stop what we consider not a recipient.
Yes, to you, the individual.
Yes. So, and I wonder why in the Kakwenza saga, such tools were not put
Utilized
to use. But
first,
that's a
went
debate,
straight to court.
for another day.
Yeah.
Court is also another option. But these are quick tools available to any new media user on all platforms. When it comes to the issue of rights and responsibilities, Article 17 of our Constitution clearly stipulates the duties of a
The
citizen.
citizen, yes.
So yes, enjoyment of rights goes hand in hand with the responsibilities, and that's not debatable. And that's why even in the limitations, you must not violate the freedoms of the other.
Of others, yes.
And that goes also connects with the tools I'm saying. If I think really I have no business associating with you, there has been even a court case. I think somebody dragged Trump in the US court for blocking them. And the Ugandan also dragged the AIGP Hassan Kasinje to court for blocking them.
On WhatsApp?
Yeah,
I mean,
on Twitter.
Yeah.
And the cases were dismissed, both, because you have a right not to associate with people that you think you don't need to associate with.
Okay.
So on the recommendations, people should make use of these tools. But also we need a lot of sensitization on Article 17, as well as Chapter 4 of the Constitution on rights and responsibilities of citizens.
Fair.
Then we need also enforcement of existing laws. I do not think that Uganda as a country is lacking laws.
Okay.
We have a few bad laws. We have a few provisions in the Constitution that are not very good. Our problem is implementation of both international laws we've ratified, but also our own laws that we have made.
Okay.
Then the corruption that leads to the selective implementation of the laws, just to bias other people or a group of people.
Absolutely. Okay. I think you've had Sarah's recommendations. They're not bad. They are informative. They are good. They are, specific. So far from all my panelists, they are in the interest of strengthening the legislation and the state operations. Yes.
Yes. My conclusion is very simple, but I also like to make comments, as you said, on things that could have been left. I feel is not covered. But first, I'd like to thank the congressman. The congressman says
so
that
today is different. You are agreeing,
these issues need to be left to the president of the Republic of Uganda, who is President Museveni. I thank you for that, and I think he will ably do it.
You're relieved. I've acknowledged and recognized.
I thank you for that he will do it. And then also, I like to say that with limitation, I repeat that you're only free if your freedom, my freedom, I'm only free if my freedom doesn't interfere with yours.
With mine.
Yes.
And who determines that is the courts of law to regulate, or, to interpret this.
Okay.
Now, I also want to insist that maybe part of the awareness is that people should know that when you are accused to have violated the other space of the other, there are defenses too. And already cited the case of Forteno against a monitor, where a monitor insisted on the defense of the truth. And I think any other possible defenses. Of course, you have other defenses like apology. Apology is a defense that I am
mitigating.
sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. If it is printed, then you print it on the newspaper. Another defense is to admit that no, apologies with admission, but the other is to deny I didn't say it. But more importantly is the defense of the truth, if you really feel that what you said is the truth.
Yeah.
So, short of that, we can exercise our freedom. But I like to also say that the congressman seems to think that most of these things, the infrastructure, came at a certain historical time, which must come. Not all states are the same. Even if you go to Ethiopia, right from accusation of foreign currency of dollars, you don't have it anyhow. Two, the way we have mobile phones here that you can have and dispose it of, or even the media. So it is not true to say that whatever is available came at a certain historical time. No, states and leadership have the capacity to use the law and regulate it otherwise.
No, that's absolutely true.
It is not automatic that FM stations has come at a time Museveni is there. If Museveni didn't want, he would regulate it
other
by use of
countries
law.
have.
They do, but that's why I'm giving you states.
I think
I'm giving you
Just
states.
on a lighter,
you're giving wrong
on a
examples.
lighter moment with the,
You can give
with
me a
the
better
permission
one.
of Berretta.
So
So one
we're
time,
winding up.
yes, we are winding up.
Yes,
Just
indeed.
briefly,
debate
it's
again.
not opening. So one time I was traveling to Cameroon with an NRM diehard. So, and it was at the time of campaigns, 2006. He was saying that among the achievements of NRM brought MTN to Uganda.
That's not what he said.
So I know, but so when we landed in Cameroon, so welcome MTN Cameroon. So I said, has brought this one.
But I'm saying not all the technology that has come at a given historical time is thematically.
I don't know how it's
there are
relevant to this,
regulations,
but
there are laws there. Not all states have done it. You don't have radio stations and that freedom in all states.
no, we left trains, but they're not there.
we
But
have
let's
done
not go there.
So, my conclusion is that we have freedom of
It's a liberal
expression.
economy.
We have freedom of
Everywhere.
speech, which we should exercise as Ugandans. We should enjoy it, but very judiciously, and we should do it with due consideration to the rights of others.
Wow. I think you've heard it from the horse's mouth and the other persons that I have heard this evening. The conversation is still interesting. I think it's still ongoing because
because Jackie has a last word.
Jackie has a last one again.
No.
Really?
Actually,
Okay, in one second.
I think one thing we need to make a culture amongst us is that we don't have to be political friends to do things that are beneficial to our community. And there is no political strength in strictly being to people that are obligated to be your friends. And where does that bring us to? Some things we don't even need to create legislation for. If we empower the ability of persuasion, and someone I saw one political leader complaining that his colleague lies about him most of the time, and the lie was that he works with another political party leader secretly. I don't think any democratic leader should apologize for that. It's in your interest to be able to speak to another person.
And work with any other.
Work with any other person. That is how you begin to undo the thickness of friction and aggression in the population.
But
We
Jackie,
don't have
aren't
to
you reopening the
another
debate?
debate.
Because
No, no, no,
society
no.
cannot
It's a
run on
recommendation.
Ubuntu
It's a
concept.
recommendation, Sarah.
Ubuntu is
Ubuntu
challenging.
cannot
Okay.
govern. If maybe, you know,
No.
just briefly, as towards your conclusion, you know,
Now-
Abraham Lincoln said,
Now you're
if
opening
men
the
were
debate afresh.
angels, then there will be no need for constitutions and,
And he
laws.
also
Okay.
said one day when he was going to war that I'm going to tap into the part of my good angels. I
Ah,
remember that in
okay.
1861.
Uh-huh.
I
Yes,
remember
but
that, yes.
the society is
Every-
governed by laws.
Oh, well.
And thank you so much, Madam Monica. That's what I thought.
This conversation will not end here. We will have to bring another discussion and, you know, an extension of this because anyhow,
Same panel, same sitting.
same panel,
Yes.
same sitting.
Yeah, because
there
we
are
have
things that we
pending
have not
agenda.
existed. Yeah, you can see Jackie and Sarah, we are opening the debate afresh. But I would like to thank you this far. Continue the discussion on our social media handles that are right there on your screen. Thank you for being here with us. We are here every Friday, and we'd like to encourage you to follow us. This is our space as the citizens of Uganda, where you are free to express yourself. Although, as the panelists have said, there are so many
There are
things that you have to
responsibilities.
know in terms of responsibilities, duties of citizens. So we want to thank you. We want to sign out till we meet again. Shalom.